going to begin with a few announcements and then we'll lead into the talk. You're joining us on our regular Sunday sit. That's every Sunday, 4:30 p.m. to 6 p.m. That's online on Zoom. And on the third Sunday of the month, we meet in person and online. So you can tune in either way, in person at UUCOD, or still hop onto Zoom and watch us there. On Tuesdays, we have our meditation as refuge. Joe Kai Blackwell will be leading this next one. That's every Tuesday on Zoom, 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m. Wednesdays, we have our Just Sit silent meditation, peer-led, every Wednesday on Zoom, 5:30 p.m. to 6:15 p.m. And on Fridays, Valerie Cousin will be teaching this next Friday's loving kindness meditation, which is every Friday on Zoom, 4:30 p.m. to 5:15 p.m. And we're also doing our meditation for everyone beginning meditation introduction courses. That's the first Saturday of the month. The next one is going to be led by Joe Kai on November 5th. And that is a 10 a.m. class. And it's a suggested donation of $20 for that class. I'm also going to be posting some links into the chat for how to support the organization and support the teachers as well. We always appreciate your support, whether that be financial, time, talent, what have you. Presence, of course, is part of that support as well. So we really appreciate you here today. With that, I'll let Tenshin take care of it. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Hope you're all doing well. So I think the tradition is to sit for half an hour, and then I have been asked to give a talk or a presentation on wise speech. So the most wise part is going to be the silence beforehand. So please enjoy the Zazen and enjoy your silent life. Okay. We'll start. Thank you, everybody. So context, I guess, I think we're all talking about the Eightfold Path. You know, this arose out of the Buddha's realization, where he said, "I, all beings of the great earth, are the wisdom and virtue of the awakened one to thusness." And then he felt that apparently at that time that he couldn't convey this to people. So then there was a fair amount of thought on how it could be conveyed, because he realized that he wasn't in this world on his own. There's a lot of people with a similar direction that needed some guidance. He also knew that each person really needed to do that for themselves. So then he made a commitment basically to himself, or in many ways he didn't have a choice. He, you know, because he was a human and those humans around him, he couldn't really relieve all suffering until the people around him were also helped to the best of his ability. So he thought how people of his time could relate to a way that would help them go through all of their conditioning to the point where they could be at one with their environment and the people around them. So that's that right samadhi, or I guess you're saying wise samadhi, which is obviously it's a technical term. We don't have the word in English. It's put forward quite often as concentration, but it's not just concentration. It's more like being one concentration. So when something happens there, you feel it to a certain degree in whatever way. Now we look in the path, I think we're now at the third, if I remember rightly. So it's wise or right effort, rise or right thought or view, right intention or wise intention, and then wise speech. Now, why does that fall here at number 3? In terms of a path, this is more the aspect of speech of commitment, you know, in the way of a path, not something that just stands alone. So these first 3 or 4, you could say, or 3, you would say this is how we as human beings get our mind sorted to actually do something. So if I want to do something, as I see things as they are, I see the project that's in front of me. And then I have to ask the question, do I really intend to do this? So that intention is there. Then I have to begin to apply that intention And then the next thing is then make it known that I am going to do it. And then I get the support of people around me as well. And also, the shame of not doing it, which forces me to do it in one way or another. And then the fourth one then is that once those are in line, then actually doing something, which is the right action. Now, if we take right speech just on its own, now the Eightfold Path can be just taken rather than a path that one leads to the other. It can also be just taken as a thing. Now, for many people, is right speech isn't really an important part of the Eightfold Path. Most of us, don't tell lies on a regular basis, etc. And wise speech is maybe qualitatively a little different than right speech, or speech in accord with the reality of whatever is here. But there's also many ways that we use speech. Like I was listing some of them, and we may use speech to deflect attention. We may use speech to entertain. We may use speech to fill time. We may use speech to avoid actually doing something as well. As human beings in our society, we're in quite an interesting time, as the Chinese curse says, that we don't really know what people are saying is true. It's very difficult to qualify those things. So what that engenders in me, there's then a trust issue that comes up. I can't really trust them. I can't really be relaxed in this circumstance and situation. And now that's maybe okay if you live on your own, but if you're, say, in a community and many different things depend on what you say and how you are, then that's going to have ramifications across the board. In politics, it also has ramifications that go way farther than we think or know along those lines. If you look at it, the right speech appears in many different aspects of the Buddha's teaching. So it's right there at the beginning in his first teachings. It's right there at the end in the 8 awarenesses of the enlightened person, where he says, let's see, where are we? He says, avoid idle chatter. That's one of the things that he says at the end. So how do you quantify that? What does that mean? Because there's also aspects of our human being, which again, the Buddha was highlighting, is this is what we do as humans. And this is a way that we can mitigate the suffering that we have as human beings. How do we use speech as a force to engender bonding, commitment, etc.? Truth, all of these things that bond our society. Because truth doesn't just reside in the depths, it resides as our momentary existence. In terms of translation, this word right is kind of interesting, because it doesn't mean opposed to something else like wrong. It just means reflective of reality, more in that way. So the first step is see things as they are and intend to keep them this way, because it has certain benefits that we see through living. One of the things is that our internal dialogue doesn't take over and lead us in places that cause us suffering. The narratives that we have about the world, we have about the people around us, and more insidiously about ourselves, that act as subroutines, that go, well, a person like me can't do something, for instance, and this is an internal speech that goes on, that tends to define us as human beings. And this aspect of right is to try and match it with the reality of this moment in time. Like if I tell myself a story about myself now, it's got very little to do with the fact that the sun is beginning to set, there's clouds, there's people around me. that my narrative doesn't mean anything at all, really, but it can set a mood inside. You know, now you could say that wise speech is something that recognizes that and waits for information before making judgments in whatever way, or analysis of a time or place. Is if we look more into the Buddha's teachings of speech, it's in the precepts too. You have to remember in the Zen precepts, they have been reduced from 400 and something in the Theravada Vinaya down to 16 now. So therefore, these precepts are fairly dense and layered in certain ways. They're also sort of taken away from things that are more practical. I'm not saying the precepts aren't practical, they're very practical. It's just that certain things are around what you should sit on, when, etc., which can be put into local kind of, say, regulations or whatever. But in what we call the 10 grave precepts, you know, so do not kill, do not tell a lie, do not steal, do not be greedy or abuse sexual energy. Fourth one, do not elevate yourself and blame others. Do not talk about others' errors and faults. Do not be stingy. Don't be angry. Don't defame. The 3 treasures. I think I've got 10 there, but it's good enough. And out of that, they divide the precepts into ones committed by body, speech, and mind. Now, it's kind of interesting when you look at it. You'd say 4 definitely are involved with speech. And one of them usually appears in a large way as speech, and that's anger. Do not be angry or practice angry actions. So those would be do not tell a lie. And then we also, with this stuff, is that why? Part of it is, what is our motivation for telling a lie? You know? So obviously our motivations need to be looked at as human beings. And again, being social animals is sometimes we want to appear to be something that we're not, because people may think better of us, etc. Those motivations are interesting, but for every so-called reward we give ourselves by doing something like that, there's a cost on the other side. So these things are worthwhile studying, because this is how speech really is seen. And obviously, I'm not talking about listening to the radio right now, or the talk that goes on and fills the space. Another one is, you know, to elevate oneself and put others down. Why do we need to do that? Aren't we satisfied with who I am and what's going on? Another one, talking about others' errors and faults, when we know perfectly well, you know, I have them, you know, and maybe I should focus on those first, and then maybe I can open my mouth along those lines. Then there's another one that's really interesting too, which is the last of these 10 is do not defame the 3 treasures, so the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Now, when you take it that way, is that's also you. So don't talk bad about yourself as well. So it works in the other direction as well. So in terms of speech, the so-called wise aspect of speech is to allow there to be some space and to reflect on what you're going to say, and maybe the implications of what's going to turn out from the words that you use. And as you know, as we know, is that each of us, I'm sure, have made some really hasty comments that have haunted us maybe for years along those lines. I remember there used to be probably still is a song by the Smiths called "Big Mouth Strikes Again." You know, is that we want to say something funnier or impactful, and we really put our foot in it and get in trouble over these things. So you know, it's one of those things. It's a major part of what we do as human beings, and so it is a major area to actually pay attention to in terms of our daily life practice, and that's where most of this occurs. A lot of people say, well, how do you practice in daily life? Is pick any one of, say, these precepts, or, you know, this, how do I use speech, and see how that occurs. Now we can use speech that kills, you know, it cuts through things, and we can use speech that engenders. We can use entendre, which is can be very funny. We can talk through analogies. We can communicate in many different ways along those lines. But what's our intention behind this? And how do we really want to have this turn out? You know, in terms of Buddhism, that main teaching that the Buddha taught from beginning to end was how to end suffering. It must be realized that he didn't achieve that in his lifetime. You know, and he taught for over 40 years, and they say, you know, he gave over 300 or 400 Dharma talks, which doesn't seem much actually for that period of time. You know, but before you open your mouth is that what do I really want to convey? You know, and how is this going to affect the other person? Now, my teacher, Maizumi Roshi, would often say, in terms of dealing with people and events, is there's 4 criteria that you've got to bear in mind: time, place, person, amount. So amount is that last one. So for instance, it may, if somebody is busy, it's probably not the best time to bring something up. You know, place. If it's really crowded, and you're interrupting things, you're probably not the best place to bring it up. Person. Some people are very arrogant and need very strong messages, maybe in public and at the wrong time. It's people who are more sensitive. You suggest it to them alone on one side. And then the amount is that, you know, quite often people can only take in a certain amount. And so you try and say the right amount. Now, this is ongoing. It's not that we do those things right or wrongly, is that you try and then there's an adjustment. All of this is awareness. And you see how these things are functioning, and then develop your speech in accord with whatever is there. Now, it's not that you should speak in a certain way, but the important thing is to express the truth wherever you are, because of the effects again of a person's voice. You know, I mean, we look at the say the speeches that people have given over history. And you look at the ones that really encourage people, and they last thousands of years, like the Buddhist speeches, you know, which is remarkable, seeing as though I think for the first 300 years after he died, they were passed down orally. Somebody was telling me they had writing, but one of the things is that was mainly for mercantile type discourse. It wasn't really for spiritual discourse. That really had to be something intimate that was conveyed from person to person. But it managed somehow to stay intact through that whole oral period. But apparently they were really good at doing that. And that oral tradition continues in India in many different forms, not just in Buddhism. And then round about, you know, the time of Christ, maybe a little bit before, it began to be written down. And then that writing in terms of translation has stayed pretty standard from then down to this day. But just look at the power of that, the power of words. You can also look at the power of negative speech too. You know, and see, it tends not to last as long, which is kind of interesting. You know, I once did a non-violence workshop, And one of the interesting things in this workshop was that they had you you had to go get in somebody's face and be angry with them, and you know, try and rile them in one way or another, which you needed somebody to stand on one side to separate you in case it kind of went wrong. But then the other person had to just smile and take it in, and give out loving kindness. You know, it wasn't a religious one. It was just, you had to do it. And the interesting thing is that the person that was actually smiling was the one that was in power. The other person was trying to do something. The other person was just receiving and letting it through in that way. And in our history, this is the thing, we tend not to stick with violence for a long period of time. But that aspect of peace is something that is innate with us, that we practice over and over and over. Now, this speech is just, know the power of speech and what it can do, even on small levels. I mean, one of the biggest things that, say, a Zen center, for instance, is communication and the passing on of information. You know, simply because there's so many things that need to be taken care of. You know, with the property, with the land, with arrangements for groups coming in, for people coming in. There's a lot of engagement that needs to be gone on in terms of thought, and then the communication of those things that are important to everybody else. And so it's an amazing tool that we have. And as we know through histories, is that if this is passed down in a truthful way, then it has a big impact, which can help future generations along those lines. Not only this moment in time, but later. But it is interesting, just the human tendencies. Like, for instance, if I say tomorrow, we're not going to get up early, we're going to be able to sleep in, that message will get around within 5 minutes. Now, if I say there's something more that needs to be done, like we're going to sit an extra period of Zazen, it might end up with the person that I tell, you know, right there. And again, it's that preference. We talk about choice, etc. You know, and there's that thing is that for each one of us is, what's my responsibility in this communication? You know, now, if you are the one who's responsible, then you have a lot of freedom. You can take what comes in, and you can give out. You don't have to block something off, which takes a lot of energy. And then with this passing on of the isness of our own life, then also people begin to learn from that aspect too. You know, this person basically is just telling me about the facts. They're not talking about the philosophies that lie behind it. They're not analyzing it. They're just saying, yes, this is what's happened. This is the result of what's happened, and this seems like a good idea. Let's try that, and then everybody can be on board in doing it. You know, so you could say that this is wise speech, but it's also natural speech for most of us in our own lives, because we understand where things can go wrong in terms of communication. I mean, another way is just look at the trouble that you can get if you text somebody that you sort of know, and then they start to read into it things that are not really there. And then the next level is, maybe you talk with somebody on the phone. Then you can hear the intonation, you can hear the emotion, you can hear all kinds of things, which also gives you clues to the speech that you're given and how that's being received. But even better is when you see a person live, and you get the full body experience of the interaction of speech, where somebody can immediately say something and it can be received, and then you can hear, you can say, you can mitigate, you can correct your language or whatever, in that way. Of course, that's also a practice. And again, that's part of the right or wise speech. Don't practice something that doesn't work. You know, even silence is an excellent form of speech where you can receive. And then the other person sees that you are receiving whatever's going on, and then they're more likely to allow you to speak and it reach them in whatever way. So, you know, like I'm saying in this in this presentation, is that speech can be used throughout all aspects of your life as a major part of practice. Remember, the biggest part of practice is just being. But the way that we express ourselves is through that aspect of communication with the people around us. And obviously that's a two-way experience. Now, in terms of teaching, I remember one, I used to be really nervous about giving talks, until I realized that my nervousness was that I wanted to tell people the truth. I didn't want to mislead them when I spoke. And then because I went through that, it sort of really helped me. This is the way that my mind prepares for me to speak. And then I have to look at those things that I really see are the truth and then speak them. So if I've read some religious figure's dissertation on something and I don't understand it, I can't speak on it. I can't do that if it doesn't resonate with me, because I'd be telling a lie. I'd be saying somebody else's words, which is not the expression of my own experience. And again, as a teacher, that's really, you know, that's a really important thing to bear in mind. Like for myself, if I don't understand it, I'll say, well, go and talk with, say, Jikyo Roshi. You know, she's really meticulous on this aspect of Buddhism. And the thing is then it becomes more a sense of communication and resource, rather than something that makes me into something. You know, again, is that communication, basically that word communication means to come into one. So we get on the same page. Now, if I'm giving a talk and I see that that's not occurring, then I have to change tack. I have to change in that way. The speech has to be right in the sense that it communicates along those lines. It also has to mesh from the digested teachings that I've taken from the Buddha's teachings, the things that I practiced for many years. And then those things being digested and I can see them applying into my life, and I can talk about them in that way. Now, for me, what would be, say, wrong speech would be just to say about somebody else's work and just agree with what they're doing. For me, it's far more important is to focus on the places that I don't understand. Because if I focus on not understanding, then I can look at that and eventually it will be understood just through practice and looking at it. That's one of the beauties of our basic awareness, which again is this right thought or view. We return to that, this basic awareness. If you keep looking at something for long enough, it will become clear. You know, but in saying that is that I don't want to say like, well, you look at it for 5 minutes and it'll become clear, is that this may be a lifetime's work, but in time as things become clear, they're not so complicated or convoluted, you know. And if you practice this right seeing, well, how is this? How does this apply to me? If somebody is given, say, a long-winded speech, is you've got to look at their motivations, what they're trying to do. What is their view of speech? What is their view of communication? Now, we can do this as human beings. They say anthropologically is that we have large brains simply to deal with each other, not necessarily just our environment. That part's fairly small, but just look at the sophistication of communication that we have. You know, I mean, I know people walk into a room and they'll tell me how it is, you know, and then other people almost have to be banged over the head to know that it's not a safe area, you know, in that way. But the sensitivity that we can develop through listening, and then as accurately as possible expressing, you know, who we are, what we're doing and why we're doing those things. That's an amazing practice and a gift. I know for myself, for many years, I would get into trouble for wanting to be liked, for instance. You know, and I would say, yeah, it's okay, but in my heart, I didn't feel that way. So that's a lie, even though it is a nice thing to say to somebody else, you know. And then it was just like, well, I'm not getting angry over this that you're doing, you know. And then until I was going, well, how do you feel? And then, you know, and this is just having a conversation with myself, you know, how do you feel? I don't really like that. Okay. Well, you can say yes, you can say no, or you can say, I think about it. Don't just say yes. And so in doing that and having this conversation with myself, which is the other direction that speech goes, is that then I could actually put that into action and go, okay, I'll think about it and do something that really feels right for the circumstance and situation. Because if I'm not true to myself, I'm also not true to the people around me either. And then that begins to spread because people then see that's the dynamic of the place in one way or another. So, you know, there's a lot to you know, to talk on here. But I'd like to open it up and I can take it then in whatever direction your questions or interests go. So thank you. Okay, well, it looks like we're about finished with the right to speech. Maybe I'll do two of them next time. Okay, so I'll hand it back over to Adrian. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that's all there is to it. Of course, check your newsletters as they come in. All of our talks are on YouTube as well. We haven't talked yet about if we want to put your talk on YouTube. That's entirely up to you, Tenshin. But
yeah, it's fine if you want to. No problem.
Fantastic. Yeah. So you'll be able to catch this talk before the next talk. We're releasing each talk before the next talk these days. So yeah, join us there. And again, I posted some links into the chat if you'd like to volunteer, donate, help out. Your presence. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.